Now, one very important form of freedom that I think the vast majority of people overlook is decision freedom. Truly, one of my least phrases that I'll ever hear someone say is, I don't have a choice or I didn't have a choice. That is categorically incorrect, okay? In every possible way, it is an incorrect statement. We always, always, always have a choice. And I will say this until I am blue in the face or dead in the ground. We always have a choice. Welcome to the Manifesting Millions podcast, where we talk about manifestation, money, and practical guidance to creating your dream reality. My name is Amy Van Meel, and I am an experienced coach and transformation guide, obsessed with helping you get out of your own way and create a life that blows your mind each day you wake up. My goal in this podcast is to share practical manifestation, self-awareness, and growth techniques in real talk conversations. So if you're ready to massively transform your reality, your finances, your relationships, and your overall enjoyment of life, you are in the right place. I am absolutely delighted that you're here with me today, babe. Let's get into it. Well, hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Manifesting Millions podcast. I am super excited to have you here with me today. Today's a big day. We are officially bringing out part 5 of our 5-part Energies of Money series. It's kind of a big deal. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to go through the whole thing that I've covered in the last 4 parts at the start. You know the rigmarole if you have made it here already. If this is your first of the 5 parts that you are hearing, I definitely encourage you to go back and catch the other 4. Not because they necessarily build on one another, but each one has very unique, specific information for the energy that we cover. What I do want to just very quickly remind you is that the first part of this episode, of course, we're going to be talking about how we define today's energy, what it could look like, how it could show up in our life, what could be good or not so good about it. But if you want to understand how to shift the low frequency energy, if you want to understand how to really build and maintain the higher frequency energy, and let me tell you, today's is a juicy one to understand how to build and maintain it, you need to register for the private podcast feed. That private podcast feed is completely free. It does not cost you anything. You just put your name and your email address in, and you will receive instructions and access to the private podcast feed. To get that, go to amyvanmeel.com/money and the number 5. And of course, that URL is in the show notes for you. There is no time limit to how long you have to access the 5 energies of money. Like once you actually enroll, you have access until, I suppose, one day I might decide to get rid of it or I shuffle off said mortal coil. But until one of those days happens, there's no time limit, and it's not like you're restricted to the number of plays, which means you can listen to it over and over and over again, which is really great. As your life begins to shift, you may want to go back and go, okay, so I've made this shift. How do I go back and create more abundance here? How do I go back and create more wealth or flow here? Today is a really juicy day because we're going to be talking about the energy of constriction and freedom. And there is a reason that I kept this one until the end. And I promise you the reason is not because I didn't know what I wanted to say until very recently. I wanted to talk about freedom at the end because I think it's one of the harder to pin down energies. And we're going to talk about that today a little bit further for you. But I also think that it is one of the most expansive feeling energies, and not just in terms of your finances or your money, but in all areas of your life. So we're going to get into it today. I will not make you wait any longer. I'm super excited, and today is a very full episode, so we're going to get right in. So, of course, we start by defining our 2 energies. So we're going to talk about constriction first. I define constriction as a lack of options, a lack of opportunities, sort of this general lack of things available to you. The action of making something narrower by pressure, right? Google likes to think of like this is how we kind of see constriction, but I think it's very much applies to all our areas of life. Constriction is a place where something has become tighter or narrower. It's a feeling of pressure, of tightness, or an inability to move or grow. This is something that I have so much experience across my professional life in particular, but even in different areas of my financial life throughout my life that of just like, oh my goodness, I just feel so s- tight, so under pressure. This like I just can't seem to create or go after what I want. Constriction is a close cousin to scarcity, which we covered in part 1 of this series, as both do arise from an energy of lack or not enough. Now, they show up a little bit differently, they feel different for us, which is why they are not the same energy, and we talk about them separately, but it is a close cousin to scarcity. Talking about freedom, on the other hand, again, freedom is a challenging energy to define. So if you feel like, Amy, you didn't give me a whole lot of understanding of what freedom is, I promise you, as we go through the episode, you're going to understand more and more what it looks like and more specifically what it could look like for you. Okay. But to give us a bit of framework to understand the energy of freedom, I see it as being able to do what you want without restraint. It's a sense of autonomy or giving yourself your own guidelines. It's a state of independence where you can do what you like, or it's the ability to create whatever you want. I do feel like all 4 of these need a little asterisk of like, so long as you're doing things within like legal and moral guidelines, that's sort of implied. But like outside of that, this is freedom is this like this autonomous, independent state where you can go after and create and do and spend your time however you desire to do those things. And that's really, really important in terms of like grounding our energy of freedom. Are you ready to transform your financial future and unlock your true potential? Introducing Building Fempires, the groundbreaking 7-week online program designed exclusively for women who are ready to take control of their finances and their lives. Are you tired of feeling overwhelmed by credit cards or investing and all the heavy, complicated financial jargon? We've got you covered, baby. Building Fempires breaks down complex financial concepts into easy to understand lessons, giving you the knowledge and confidence to make smart money decisions. But that is just the beginning. We also dive deep into the power of your subconscious mind, helping you shatter limiting beliefs that have been holding you back and keeping you stuck. Through proven techniques like emotional freedom techniques and meditation, you'll experience lasting internal shifts that will skyrocket your self-confidence and open doors to promotions and raises and a higher quality of life. Imagine feeling financially fearless, embodying your most powerful self, and creating the life you've always dreamed of. That's the Building Fempires difference. Don't wait. This life-changing opportunity won't be available for too much longer. So go ahead and visit amyvanmeal.com/money now to start your journey towards financial empowerment and personal transformation. Building Fempires, empowering women everywhere to embrace their most powerful and financially fearless self. So let's get a little bit more into the meat of it. We've kept it a little bit light at the start because the definition for both constriction and freedom isn't as deep as some of the others, because the context for both of these energies is going to show up in our life, and like how it can show up, what it could look like, and what could be great or not great about it. That's where we're really going to understand these 2 energies the most. So let's talk about constriction to start. So I mentioned that it's a close cousin to scarcity. Whereas scarcity itself has an element of less than what is needed, right? Scarcity is like you're literally lacking something that you actually need in order to keep going. Constriction could be living right at the line. So for example, you have enough to cover all your bills and your food and your housing, but you have no extra. And if anything came along, like an unexpected expense, for example, you may be able to cover it, but it would add additional pressure to other areas of your financial life, or it might put you behind and into catch-up mode. And of course, that depends on the I'm going to say volume, right, of that unexpected expense, or it could be, and I don't want to say like expense doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be something bad, like suddenly you needed a new furnace or like a new roof. It could also be something good. Suddenly your friend is getting married and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to come up with $3,000 to head to this destination wedding, right? Like that's a possibility. So it's not always that it's a bad thing. And scarcity is where you just don't have enough, period. But constriction, you're covering the basics, but anything extra is really, really tight and hard for you to cover. We feel constriction very often when we are desiring to expand our life in some way. So one of the things that I think is important to understand about constriction, again, I'm gonna color this against scarcity a little because it's a good cousin to give us an idea. Scarcity is we just don't have enough. Constriction, we have enough. Okay. So you may not notice it in the day to day. Where you're going to start noticing it is when you start chafing against what is possible for you. And it's generally funded or like grounded by this desire to expand. So let's say, for example, you have a really good career, you have a job that you're like, nah, it's all right, it pays me good money, it's kind of whatever, but you've wanted to start a business for a really long time. However, you feel a constriction of time, energy, or money that limits you from executing in the way you'd like to, right? It feels like you're wrestling against some invisible force where you might go, well, I really have everything else I need to start a business, but I don't have any time. Or I have everything that I need to start a business, but I have no money, or I have no energy, or I have, right? It's this sense of this almost boundary that's coming into place that's pushing back against your desire for expansion. Now, the energy of constriction can also be applied to us from outside forces or people. And it's good to understand that, like, sometimes it's going to be internal when you have this expansion desire coming forward. Sometimes it's going to be external. So, to give an example for this, lots of folks, right? Billions and billions of folks around the world have a typical 9 to 5 job, and lots of people in those 9 to 5, and again, just use that as like air quotes, right? It doesn't matter if you work a different time and you don't work Monday to Friday, but we have employees who feel this real constriction because they're required to follow specific protocols or processes. And more importantly, that sense of constriction will be felt if you have to follow those processes or protocols, regardless of whether those are effective or not. Okay. I know when I worked in tech, this was something that we often bumped up against, that there was something that was overlaid by a team in a completely different area of the company, but we were, our team or our project or whatever was hamstrung by these specific processes or protocols or whatever needed to be followed. And it got in the way of really being creative and moving things forward. That is a sense of constriction. Now, here's a really important thing about constriction. Over time, constriction can move into an energy of disconnection. Okay. So after an extended period of time where you feel this narrowing, where you feel restrained, where you feel under pressure to exist in a certain way, you may unconsciously move into disconnection as a way to dissociate yourself from a reality that you can't seem to change. And the trouble with this extended constriction that leads into disconnection is that it makes the hurdle a little harder to overcome, okay? Because now not only do you have to like become aware that you have disconnected, so now you have this like pre-step, right? Then you need to make the decision to actively engage. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more further down the line, but like when we're in the energy of constriction, if we can catch the constriction while we're still in this like constricted territory, as a side note, I've never said constriction this many times in my entire life. That if you can catch the energy of constriction while you're still in it before you head into this disconnected state, there's still going to be resistance that you're overcoming. Absolutely. You're not going to be like, "Oh my God, it's like free and easy here." It's still going to feel hard, but you're starting from a state of awareness, and the friction or the resistance of constriction can actually propel you forward. So we'll talk about that a little bit more when I talk about like what's great about constriction. I just want you to understand that prolonged sense, and I actually didn't write this in the Why Do We Care notes, and I'm just going to add that in here. The reason why we care about this prolonged sense of constriction is because if you let it go long enough, it will tip over into disconnection, and then you just disconnect and dissociate from like whatever it is. So let's say, for example, you have a job that just you feel very, very hamstrung in your job and you can't seem to move forward. If you leave that long enough, you're just like, well, can't think of another solution or whatever. Like you're not willing to take action to shift it, whether that means getting a different job or moving to a different team or, working on different projects. And then eventually you're going to find yourself in this just disconnected state. We talked about the energy of disconnection in, I feel like part 4. I can't remember off the top of my head, and it's not in my notes, but definitely go back and like check out that part as well. We'll talk where I talk about the energy of disconnection a little bit more fully for you. Okay, let's make the shift and talk about freedom. How does freedom show up for us? What does it look like? I mentioned at the start, and you're going to notice as we go through these examples, freedom is this sort of mystical, kind of loose, hard to pin down energy, right? Because freedom is kind of the ideal state, right? Like when you think about anything that you're like, oh my God, that would just be amazing. It's often tied to this energy of freedom. When we feel frustrated at work or in relationships or in our finances, we have a deep desire for the frustration to be relieved by what we perceive as absolute freedom. Now, there is a reason, I promise you, that financially free or financial freedom is a hallmark of independence and success. Okay? When we talk about like our ideal state, you talk about retirement, you talk about like dreams for the future, how often have you used the phrase, I want financial freedom, or I want to be financially free? It's because it's the idea of a state of being where you are no longer beholden to someone or something else, right? We think that financial freedom means we can do whatever we want. And there's a part of that that's, of course, true, so long as we remember that for the time we are included in the world, right? We live in this 3D reality. Our finances will generally also fall into guidelines and regulations and social constructs that exist within the 3D realm. But our idea of financial freedom is this like amazing space that we can just do whatever. And I think a lot of people, I'm going to guess you, and I definitely have felt this at times in my life, foresee this financial freedom as like you can disconnect from, quote, the man, right? Once you're financially free, you're no longer beholden to have to go to a job every day. And that can be financial freedom, but like there's also people who have jobs who feel very free, right? And so when I get into the back half of this podcast, which exists on the private podcast feed, and I talk about how we can build and maintain the sense of freedom, understand that you can do that even as you have a job, even as you have an active growing business, even as you have whatever that exists in your life right now that you might be like, well, freedom must be the absence of this thing. It's not necessarily true. I think that lots of folks, I'm very curious. I've been having some very interesting conversations the last week or so. Very curious to see how things are going to shift in the generations as we continue moving forward. So retirement itself is a relatively new concept. I know that that's going to sound wild, but like I think it was really in the 80s that it became this sort of common idea that like we work until we can retire. And then retirement is the state of like, well, you've got like 30 or 40 years where you don't have to go to work anymore and you have all the money that you want. You can go travel and golf and I don't know, do whatever the heck you want to do when you're retired. So I think many of us have perceived retirement as a place of freedom. Because, of course, in order to retire, in theory, you are financially secure. You don't need to report to your job anymore. Your time is yours to use, right? You have these removed responsibilities that you are currently experiencing. I want to talk about time freedom. And because we've just talked about retirement, I realize that if I seem a little bit jumpy today, it's partly because I'm recording this podcast on like a Monday evening and my brain is like trying to think of all the things that need to be done. I'm playing hooky tomorrow, going to spend some time with one of my favorite people. And I want to make sure that this podcast comes out on time, which is why I'm recording it now as opposed to when I'm feeling a little bit more like zoned in. But stay with me because I promise time freedom is related to retirement and what we were just talking about. So time freedom is I think it's a really big buzz phrase that's been moving around entrepreneurial circles for quite a while. I don't know if it's as prevalent in like employee kind of circles. I don't know how else to say that. I know that for entrepreneurs, this is a big one. I think that for folks as we age, this is a big thing. But basically, time freedom is the idea being that you get to decide how to use your time, right? So like your choice of how you use it is yours. You're not required, for example, to spend hours writing social media posts or doing bookkeeping. Instead, you've leveraged finances in order to buy time and therefore having time freedom through hiring someone else to do those tasks. Now, one very important form of freedom that I think the vast majority of people overlook is decision freedom. Truly one of my least phrases that I'll ever hear someone say is, I don't have a choice or I didn't have a choice. That is categorically incorrect, okay? In every possible way, it is an incorrect statement. We always, always, always have a choice. And I will say this until I am blue in the face or dead in the ground. We always have a choice. The fact is that we have a choice, and that choice is the foundation of decision freedom. And what I want to be clear on is that decision freedom is wholly rooted in you. So what does that mean and what does that look like exactly? Well, let's explore it through a couple of examples. You're in a job you hate, you're barely making rent, you're tired of living in constant fear and scarcity and lack. But every single day, you decide to keep thinking the same thoughts, keep doing the same things, and keep complaining about your circumstances. You could decide that you've had enough and begin to take action and create momentum, right? In breaking the circumstances that feel like they have a hold on you, but you have made the decision to stay in stuck mode. I should have fronted that with a little FYI. This might include a trigger warning. You may feel a little called out. Anyway, it's on the back half. Here's another example, okay? A different way to think of the fact that the foundation of decision freedom is always rooted in you. Let's say you are someone who's had a really tough childhood. You grew up in lots of stress and experienced quite a bit of trauma. Despite the circumstances of your childhood, you excelled at school and you eventually managed to go to university. In university, you experience people of all different backgrounds, right? Some living more abundantly than you, some not so much. You make a decision that your upbringing is not going to limit or define the rest of your life. So you take intentional action to heal your wounds. You make conscious and continual effort to shift your thoughts and beliefs, and your life begins to unfold in a new direction, one where happiness and joy and fulfillment as well as love and support and connection, is the order of the day. Now, scenario 2 sounds pretty fucking good, right? When we get to the end, we're like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. But notice that at the beginning, it started as this terrible childhood experience of stress and trauma and countless things that went wrong. In both scenarios, the difference is simply the decision that you made. And this is where I so often over the years have heard people say, well, I didn't have a choice. I didn't have the opportunities or privileges or whatever available to me that you had. And that might be true, but it's how you decided that was going to affect you that actually made the difference. Correct. I can never go back and like change from being a woman to being a man and like what those opportunities might open up for me differently. But I can decide to say, well, I'm exist in the world as a woman, and therefore that's always going to be a bad thing. Or I can go, well, I exist in the world as a woman. Let me make this like a superpower of mine, right? It's how we decide about these things that makes the big difference. And what I want you to really understand is that decision freedom is always in your hands. And it can show up in ways where you make an action-oriented decision or an emotion-oriented decision or a thought-focused decision or an energy-oriented decision. Now, you might be wondering why I'm talking so much about decision freedom when we talk about the energy of freedom. And the reason I really am doubling down on this is that this is one of the first and earliest places when I work with folks in a one-on-one setting who really feel the sense of constriction, who really feel like things just can't seem to be going their way for whatever reason. We talk about this first. What is your decision about that thing? What are you making it mean about you? What are you choosing to believe about that thing? Decision freedom is actually the root of all of the freedom that lives in our life, right? So when folks try to say, well, I didn't decide to experience that accident or hurt or wound or whatever, as a way to reaffirm, well, I didn't have a choice, my kind but firm reply is, but you get to decide every day the way you're going to carry that experience forward and how you're going to talk, feel, act, think about that experience. Because yes, of course, there are countless experiences that we will move through that we may not have specifically chosen or decided to have. I mean, I could write books, right, of all the experiences and things that I've gone through that I'm like, fuck, at no point did I think that that was a decision that I made to have that. But the decision freedom isn't tied to the event. I want that to be very clear. The freedom is not tied to the event. It is not tied to the experience. It is not tied to what happened. It is tied to you. You are the grounding point for it. And that's why I really want to like expand or have expanded that decision freedom and how it shows up in your life is really this core part of the energy of freedom in our lives. So now that I've really like, go back and press play again, repeat a little bit if you're kind of like, I didn't quite get it. Please go back and listen again, because decision freedom is honestly one of the most empowering and life-changing awarenesses that you can possibly ever have in your life. I'm not underselling that. I'm not overselling that. What's the word I'm trying to say? I want you to be really clear. It's a big, big, big fucking deal. So we're going to chat real quick about what's great about constriction. Now, I want to be clear. Some of the energies that we've talked about in this 5-part series have had a few more, this is what could be great about this. Constriction doesn't have a lot that's great about it. Not because it's like the worst of the energies. Well, I'm going to talk about what's great about it, but I think the biggest thing that I really want you to understand with constriction is that it can be very subtle, and if we ignore it and let it continue, it can actually like really start to derail us. It's a little bit like gravity. It has a lot of effect over a distance, right? So, what's great about constriction? It can push us to think differently, to find more creative solutions, to realize just how capable we are, right? Like think about the times that you've bumped into maybe you want to create something, or maybe you want to do something at work and you keep bumping up against all these like different constrictions and boundaries and like pressures of different things. And you go, well, what if I try it this way? What if I tried this way? What if I tried this way? It can actually prompt some creativity. In some cases, constriction can also bring people together. Like think about if your team is working under, a really tight deadline or under some kind of pressure, you're all in it together. So it can forge some strong bonds of connection. I know I definitely felt this when I was doing my architecture interior design degree, where when we were in studio and, we'd be I think possibly the last ever studio project I ever had to hand in, like I was up for 53 hours straight. And I remember, I remember the people who were in the studio with me at like 3 a.m. the second night in a row. There is something that just forges a connection in that time, right? That's constriction, it's that pressure, it's that tightness, it's that like that boundary that's pressing down, but it creates this connection across. So that can be great about constriction. I actually think that constriction energy itself is an invitation. It's an experience that is showing you what you don't really want so that you can make an intentional choice toward what you do want. And when you can start to understand that so often these low frequency energies that we experience might be invitations, might be reflections, might be ways that, universe, God, source, whatever is showing up for you going, hello, could you pay attention? Nothing in you wants this. Can we shift this, please? Right? So understand that constriction energy is an invitation to go, hey, something isn't working here. And if I continue to ignore it, like I said, we're going to go into disconnection and disassociation territory, and that's not what we want because that's not going to actually create what you want. So remembering, of course, that constriction is the energy before disconnection in a lot of cases. So being aware that you are feeling constricted before you disconnect can prompt you into taking action. All right. Let's talk about what's not so great about freedom. Now, this might sound really kind of counterintuitive. The list that I had for like what's great about constriction is not that long, but my list for what's not so great about freedom is lengthy. So let's talk about that. What's not great about freedom? Well, freedom inherently comes with a fair dose of responsibility. So I think what many folks think that they can do in some like dream reality is to have all the freedom they desire. Like think time freedom and financial freedom and decision freedom, etc., but without any responsibility. Now, little tangent, personally, I suspect that this is part of what's not working in our current financial systems, because I do believe that folks who have access to far greater financial resources, C-suite folks, like millionaires, billionaires, whatever, they have a responsibility to ensure that everyone can move forward and grow. It's what I struggle with when it comes to like the C-suite drama of massive bonuses when thousands are laid off. Because what I see is not necessarily this greediness. What I see is that it's a deflection of responsibility. Okay. Among other things. I mean, there's more to it, of course, than that. But this sense of I'm not responsible for everybody else. It's up to you to figure out your way. Whereas it's kind of the inverse of that you can't be sick enough to help somebody who's sick, right? Or you can't be broke enough to help someone who's broke. It's a little bit the inverse of that. If you have massive resources available to you, then there is a responsibility, I feel, that is on you to help others as well. And that help, I'm going to actually pause myself right there because I'm about to get on my milk box and like go about all the things. However, I just want to walk it back. Come with me, walk back to me, that it is a deflection of responsibility. Now, freedom can also be rather daunting and challenging. And I know that sounds completely counterintuitive. You're like, wait a minute, Amy, isn't freedom supposed to be like fucking amazing and like awesome and like, yay? Yes. And also it can be really tough to navigate, in particular at the start. So to help me give you a better understanding of it, let me share a little bit of my experience over the past year. So I left my job. a little over a year ago, to like really fully step into my business. I've shared this before that like what I thought was going to be a couple of days of rest turned into 2 months of absolute utter exhaustion and deep healing. And it wasn't until like just over 2 months after that that I was finally starting to get back on my feet and able to focus and creatively lean into growing my business. Okay. What I discovered once I moved into the place of like actively now stepping into growing my business is that the time freedom, right? This ability to have complete control and decision over the hours of my day was this giant, daunting, and sometimes frustrating thing. Now, I still find myself struggling internally with the fact that something like sitting down to write or record a podcast, which is integral to growing my business, but is also something that I actually really fucking enjoy, is part of my work. And it's something that I can pretty much do not only whenever I want, but wherever I want, right? I mean, I can't record a podcast in a coffee shop. That would be too loud. But it would be kind of funny, I suppose. But like I can write the podcast episode anywhere, right? I can write a sales page anywhere. I can build social media posts just about anywhere. I could do it any time of day. The struggle that I feel though comes from watching my husband leave for work every morning, or seeing how tired he might be when he comes home, or hearing friends who are really struggling with like their 9 to 5 and going, fuck, I just can't wait till I'm retired. And here I am growing this business, which has, don't get me wrong, has a tremendous amount of stresses and pressures all on its own. But in terms of freedom, I have the freedom to create what I desire, what's on my heart. I have the time freedom to sit down and like go after it. And I think that's important to understand that like that time freedom, especially at first, can feel really big and really daunting. Now, let's talk about financial freedom. I don't think there's a lot, honestly do not think that there is a lot of not so great things about financial freedom, because inherent in the freedom part of the phrase is the idea that in order for you to have that experience of financial freedom, you have also identified what that particular state and experience look like to you. All right? Now, that's very important to understand. What it looks like to you without drinking from the comparison bottle. If you have achieved a certain financial level, but you are constantly comparing what you can or cannot do against someone who has more financially, then you aren't really in a state of freedom. Okay? So when it comes to financial freedom, I feel like there's not really a lot of like not so great things, because a lot of stuff in order to be in that state will have fallen away or have been I almost said corrected. It will be filtered, I suppose, through what you define freedom as being. Now, of course, the overriding thing for freedom in terms of like what's not so great about freedom is the element of responsibility that overlays financial freedom, right? Of course, you still have bills to pay. You still exist in 3D world. It's possible that others is going to view your financial freedom as an unfairness, and they may treat you differently because of it. When you think about time freedom or decision freedom, or pick any kind of, freedom, whatever that looks like in your world, there's this element of responsibility that comes as part of it. So I suppose responsibility is maybe the not so great part of freedom. All right, my loves, that is the end of part 5 of the 5 Energies of Money series. Of course, if you want to hear the back half of the episode where I go into detail about shifting the energy of constriction and building and maintaining and growing the energy of freedom, which, oh my goodness, seriously, it's worth signing up for the 5 parts private podcast just for those 2 pieces alone. Never mind the other 4 parts that have so much in it. You need to go and register for that private podcast feed by going to amyvanmeel.com/money and the number 5. And of course, the URL is in the show notes. As I have mentioned, and you will have heard earlier in this episode, we are in the last round of the doors being open for enrollment for the Building Fempires program. It is not going to open again for quite some time. So if you are thinking at all about wanting to really improve your understanding of money, heal your relationship with money, work actively, constructively, and effortlessly with how your brain actually functions to create true and lasting shifts, not just in your finances, but in your life in general, then this is my last invitation for you in this particular episode to get your bends in there. Next week, I'm going to be addressing a few commonly asked questions on the podcast. So if you're kind of like, don't really know, you can, of course, always reach out to me on the socials. If you're not following me there yet, please go ahead and do so. I'm on Instagram and TikTok. The handle for both is the same. It's Amy Van Meel. And those are in the show notes for you because my name is a little bit more challenging for some folks to spell. It is Dutch. But for sure, reach out in the DMs and ask me any questions that you have before enrolling. Or head on over to amyvanmeel.com/money. And the sales page will cover most of what you're going to ask, okay? There is a payment plan option available. There's a pay in full option available. And you get lifetime access to the program when you sign up. I really would love to see you make the decision and enroll in the program before 2024 officially comes to a close, because what that would mean for you is that you are starting off a brand new year. And also, very importantly, a brand new astrological cycle. If you pay any attention to the astros, you've probably been hearing a lot of chatter about Pluto in the last 12 months. Pluto is set to make a massive, massive, massive shift. I'm honestly, I cannot tell you how excited I am about it for this in my own life. But there is a massive shift that is literally about to get started. I believe it starts on November 20th. So what an amazing time to align this increase in knowledge and in empowerment and in working with your subconscious mind instead of fighting against it and wondering why nothing seems to stick or stay, and actively like bring these pieces together by enrolling in the Building Vampires program. So I would love to see you inside. And with that, my loves, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast again. I would love it if you have not already to please leave a review on the podcast. And I would really, really love it so much if you would share this podcast with someone else who you think might enjoy it. I really want to get the word out more and more and more for this podcast. I think that what we're talking about here is very, very important, especially for women. There's a reason that I get behind this microphone every single week to record something powerful and useful and helpful for you and help as much or in whatever possible way I can to create an unlock for you. So I'd love it if you share this episode out as well. And with that, I will see you next week. I am super excited to see you then. And until then, bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you loved what you heard today, be sure to share it with me by leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform and help me reach more like-minded people who are ready to expand their life. If you haven't yet followed me on social media, find me on Instagram for extra love and inspiration by following @AmyVanMeel or visit my website at amyvanmeel.com. I love you so much, babe, and I am damn proud of you. I am already excited to connect in the next episode. And in the meantime, believe in yourself with the confidence of a 5-year-old.